How many of you, for real, show of hands, have heard of this word geomythology? What is up, guys? This is part 2 of my TBR, my physical TBR list, and this will be covering the nonfiction books. So if you are interested in fiction books, make sure to see my other video. If you're more interested in poetry books, wait for the third part of this series. And if you're into nonfiction, this is the place to be. So let's start off this with my first book that I've actually started reading. This is called Geomythology: How Common Stories Reflect Earth Events. This is from Timothy Burbery. And I think this is actually a book meant for like college students or you know, PhD students who are studying geology or mythology and like the cross between the two. Because it is kind of written like textbook format-esque. How many of you, for real, show of hands, have heard of this word geomythology? Because I didn't until like a few months ago. I was reading another book about sea folklore of the ocean. Another interesting topic. I'd totally recommend looking that up. And I think it was that book that had this word geomythology, because I remember writing it down and I was like, what is that? And I was reading the folklore book and I'm reading this book because I'm trying to research for a story I want to write. And I just like this concept of this is about like, why do humans have stories from ancient times? Like, what were their myths, and can we connect them with geological events? And so far I read a little bit of this book. In total, it is a pretty short book, but it's dense because it is kind of a textbooky format. It's under 100 pages. I've only gotten a few pages in, but I've gotten to a part where they talk about dragons and giants. And so this was really interesting to hear. Is like, in cultures from around the world, we have stories about giants and dragons. And specifically about giants, I remember, from what I remember reading, was like there were these big like mastodon type elephant creatures that had similar bones to humans in some capacities, but bigger obviously. And so people would find them and think that that belonged to a bigger human, and that's kind of how you can explain the myth of giants. Nerd out with me by reading this book. Next on the list is this one called The Wayfinders by Wade Davis. Sorry, I was like, oh wait, The Wayfinders by Wade. No, The Wayfinders by Wade Davis. It's why ancient wisdom matters in the modern world. Now, I spoke a little bit about this in my fiction part of this series, where I love learning about other cultures that aren't my own, and my own as well. But I do love learning too, specifically ancient cultures. But anything with ancient anything, because I just agree with that statement, you know, like ancient wisdom does matter in a modern world, of course. Like, what can we learn from it? And so given that we're in a world where climate change is getting worse, where we have pandemics raging, we have all these things where our health is interconnected with the environment, our well-being is interconnected with the environment, this is the book that I want to read.
The summary says, every culture is a unique answer to a fundamental question. What does it mean to be human and alive? Anthropologist and National Geographic explorer in residence Wade Davis leads us on a thrilling journey to celebrate the wisdom of the world's indigenous cultures. In Polynesia, we set sail with navigators whose ancestors settled the Pacific 10 centuries before Christ. In the Amazon, we meet the descendants of a true lost civilization, the peoples of the Anaconda. In the Andes, we discover that the Earth really is alive, while in Australia, we experience Dreamtime, the all-embracing philosophy of the first humans to walk out of Africa. We then travel to Nepal, where we encounter a wisdom hero, a Bodhisattva, I definitely did not say that right, who emerges from 45 years of Buddhist retreat and solitude. And finally, we settle in Borneo, where the last rainforest nomads struggle to survive. Understanding the lessons of this journey will be our mission for the next century. For Risk in the Human Legacy, a vast archive of knowledge and expertise, a catalog of the imagination. Rediscovering a new appreciation for the diversity of the human spirit as expressed by culture is among the central questions of our time.
Wow, and this is exactly the type of nonfiction books I love reading. So if this is something that you're interested in, read this with me. The next book is a book that I'm reading every single month, and I'll explain that in a second. It's called Invested: How I Learned to Master My Mind, My Fears, and My Money to Achieve Financial Freedom and Live a More Authentic Life. This is from Danielle Town, with input from Phil Town, who is her father, and he's a financial I don't want to say guru, he's an investor. But this is a 12-month plan to financial freedom. And so I've already read January and February. It's March right now that I'm recording this video, and so I have yet to read the March one. But so far I'm enjoying it. Basically, it's a father and daughter conversation where the father is teaching the daughter the basics of investing, because she, very much like me, is kind of scared to get into it, like doesn't understand the stock market. And that's exactly where I'm at. I'm like, I don't get it. I've tried, I don't get it. I went to business school, I still don't get it. Like, I don't get it. And so I picked this book up. I occasionally will read a self-help book here or there, investing book here or there. And so far I really am enjoying just the conversational tone of the book, and the explanations are very basic, and it's in like little bite-sized topics. So each chapter is for a different month. And so far I'm really enjoying it, and I'll let you guys know, like, the more I read it, what I'm thinking about it. But so far I'm enjoying it, and this is one of the financial nonfiction books that are on my list. The next book relates a little to my job. I work at a talent agency representing actors, and so I've gotten more into acting. I feel like I've always been into acting, but always been so scared to do it myself. I've done it myself a few times, but I just lacked the confidence back then. But now I'm just like, I want to learn more about acting to help my clients, and also just to help myself, because I had a theater teacher once who said it's so important to teach everybody acting, or to have everybody take a theater class once in their lives, because it's skills that you can use to build upon for interviews, or just interpersonal communication, presentation skills. Like, you can use it in any aspect of your life. And so I've gotten more into the theory, and I got this book a couple Christmases ago for my mom, the Warner Loughlin technique. And so I just want kind of interested in reading about different techniques of acting. And so this is the first one that I'll be reading.
It says, for the first time in print comes the revolutionary acting technique from the premier acting coach of our era. Not a copy of the old masters, the Warren Loughlin technique empowers the actor to create rich, nuanced, and unique characters. Discover the technique used to help create some of the most remarkable performances of our time from actors such as Amy Adams, Ryan Reynolds, Kira Sedgwick, and countless other Oscar, Emmy, Golden Globe, Tony, and Grammy nominees and winners. Loughlin debunks the myth of the tortured actor and guides you step by step through her groundbreaking technique, revealing powerful ways to unlock your creativity in a psychologically safe way.
Bingo. That's what I want to know. I want to know how to cry without pulling from traumatic experiences. You know what I mean? Like, it needs to be safe. Speaking of technique, good segue. This is Bird by Bird by Anna Lamott, and this is some instructions on writing and life. I think I heard about it on Twitter at first, and then I looked on Amazon to see like the summary. It's basically a writing book, a technique book, but people have been giving it rave reviews, and so I thought it can't hurt. I'm stuck. I've been perpetually stuck in writer's block for a while, and I'm just now getting over it a little bit with my poetry, but I'm still kind of stuck in it with like my short story, my fiction, and my scripts type of thing. So I'm hoping this gives me a little inspo. It says,
for a quarter century, more than 1 million readers, scribes, and scribblers of all ages and abilities have been inspired by Anne Lamott's lively, big-hearted, homespun advice. Advice that begins with the simple words of wisdom passed down from Anne's father, also a writer, in the iconic passage that gives the book its title. 30 years ago, my older brother, who was 10 years old at the time, was trying to get a report on birds written that he'd had 3 months to write, which was due the next day.
I remember those days because I was a big procrastinator. I would literally wait till the last second. Stress. I put the pro in procrastination, okay?
Stress, though. We were out at our family cabin in Bolinas, and he was at the kitchen table, close to tears, surrounded by binder paper and pencils and unopened books on birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. Then my father sat down beside him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird."
I felt like I wanted to cry for instance. It's like my mom says a similar thing where it's like, just take it piece by piece, and for some reason even that is like humongous in my mind. Like, okay, what piece do I take first? What piece do I tackle second? But bird by bird, it's calming. An essential volume for generations of writers young and old, Bird by Bird is a modern classic. This 25th anniversary edition will continue to spark creative minds for years to come. So I'm definitely reading this book this year. No ifs, ands, or buts. Okay, we're almost done with our nonfiction books. We have 3 more. This one is called Sensitives by Oliver Broudy. The Rise of Environmental Illness and the Search for America's Last Pure Place. Now, I love reading and learning about the environment, and recently when I bought this book, I think I bought it like maybe 8 months ago, I was just feeling down about the world, and specifically about like our situation with the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and like just how could we prevent another one in the future? How can we fix what's happening now? In many ways, like, we're tied to our environment, and in a lot of ways we're harming ourselves. We're not really treating the environment as we should, and we're kind of paying the price for it. And so I saw this book and I was like, well, this is kind of talking about the connection between our health and the environment and the environment's health. And so I'm interested in reading about this and just learning more about the topic and really diving into this study and the thought process behind all this.
So let me read the summary. It says, somewhere in the wilds of northern Arizona, a man has gone missing. His friends fear he has died by suicide. For those of his peculiar tribe, bankrupt by his medical bills, tormented by symptoms they cannot understand, dismissed as crazy by their own families, death is just the final step in a long retreat from a world that has become as inhospitable as Mars. That's a bold statement. Environmental illness has been called the defining ailment of our time, not just because it is characterized by a violent reactivity to all the trappings of modernity, everything from pesticides on our produce to the fire retardants in our electronics, but because at a time when it has never been more difficult to distinguish truth from fiction. No one is sure if it exists. Across academia and internet forums, the debate rages. Even as environmental regulations are cut, the chemical industry drops nearly 4 billion pounds of chemicals into the environment every year, and the prevalence of thyroid cancer, autism, birth defects, and male reproductive problems skyrockets.
I also was diagnosed with thyroid cancer last year. Around this time, actually, is when I got my surgery. And so there was a lot of questions surrounding that, like why at such a young age, how did I get that? Was it genetics? Was it environment? And a lot of people speculate that's an environmental issue. And so that's also one of the reasons I was interested in a book like this, was just to learn more about it.
It says, meanwhile, thousands of people suffering from EI, called sensitives, have withdrawn to the country's few remaining unpeopled regions to construct frontier lives far from the stench of civilization. One of these is the man who has gone missing, Brian Welsh. The sensitives takes us on a search for Welsh through empty miles of primordial landscape and branching side paths into the past, where the history of charlatanism, German metaphysics, early American medicine, and a host of other fascinating subjects holds clues to a deeper sickness underlying modern healthcare itself and what can be done to cure it.
And so I think this is going to have, this is a topic I've never read about, environmental illness, the way that he's describing it, as I've researched about it in terms of thyroid cancer in my own experience, and of course just what I've witnessed with the pandemic and how there's so many things we could do to clean the air and breathe cleaner air. If we can clean our water, we can clean our air, and it offers hope for people to come up with solutions, for people to invent new things. And I'm just hoping that this book gives me a deeper insight into our connection with the world and nature, and some hope. I hope it gives me some hope. And I hope we learn a little bit more about this Brian Welch guy and the journey that he's on. And I think that's what majority of this book is going to be about. If you've read this book, let me know. Has it given you hope? Has it given you more perspective, more insight about situations? If you want to read it with me, also let me know. We can do a book club. Okay, second to last book on this list is The Good Ancestor, a radical prescription for long-term thinking. The most important question we must ask ourselves is, are we being good ancestors? And that is from polio vaccine creator Jonas Salk. And the book itself is from Roman Krznaric. I am butchering that name. There is a quote from the song The Edge by U2 at the top. It's full of revelations for everyone who cares about the legacy they leave. This is another book that I feel like is going to talk a lot about nature and our impacts on it. At least that's what in my mind I'm thinking.
So it says, the most important question we must ask ourselves is, are we being good ancestors? So said Jonas Salk, who developed the polio vaccine in 1953, but refused to patent it, foregoing profit so that more lives could be saved. Salk's radical generosity to future generations should inspire us. It should. But when leading philosopher Roman Krznaric, the author of this book, examines society today, he sees just the opposite. Our short-term exploitative mindsets have colonized the future. Businesses eschew civic responsibility for immediate gains, politicians throw their support behind whatever will win the next election, and we all struggle to focus our attention beyond the next alert from our phones. I feel attacked. That's so true. The result, an inexcusable chasm between the haves and have-nots, and mounting existential threats have brought our species to the precipice of disaster. Yep. Yeah, Krznaric sees reason to hope. Okay, good, because you had me there at like, do I want to read this book? Yes, if there's hope involved, I do. Yes, the urgent struggle for intergenerational justice calls for hugely ambitious solutions, from rewiring our growth at all cost economy to giving voters of future generations a voice in our democracies. At the heart of all these changes is one we can enact within ourselves. We must trade short-sightedness for long-term thinking. In The Good Ancestor, Krznaric reveals 6 practical ways we can retrain our brains to think of the long view, including deep-time humility and cathedral thinking. His aim is to inspire wartime rebels like Greta Thunberg to shift our line from the generation to all humanity, in short, to save our planet and our future.
So, that is The Good Ancestor. And the last but not least book of my nonfiction TBR list is something that I'm really excited about. It's called The Values Compass: What 101 Countries Teach Us About Purpose, Life, and Leadership. And this is by Dr. Mandeep Ray. And off the bat, it kind of looks like a self-help book the way that the cover is made. And I think it's kind of supposed to be in a way. But what really drew me to this book was the idea of traveling to all these countries that the author is going to and finding out what it is that each culture really values and why they value it and what can we learn from them. Can we use that in our society here in America? And I think that is what drew me into it. I really want to see, I want to be inspired. And I think that this book is going to do that. It's going to inspire me. It's going to teach me something new, which I always love. I love learning new things, and so I think that's why I'm really excited about this book in particular. Here's a little summary. Broadcast journalist Dr. Mandeep Ray. Oh, pause. I love when journalists write books. I really do. There's a book I read about the oceans by Cynthia Barnett. I think it's called The Sounds of the Sea or something. The Spells of the Sea. No, something with the sea, by Cynthia Barnett, and I have to read it again. I'll link it down below. It's a fantastic book written by somebody with a journalism background, and I just love the way that she writes. It's very clear, and she explains things in a in a well-explained manner. No, she explained things in an easy way to understand. She also made that book fun. And I love the structure she took with it. And so when journalists write books, another example being like Ronan Farrow wrote a book about the Harvey Weinstein, I was consuming that book left and right all day, every day until I finished it. It was just enthralling to me. Probably because journalists are used to writing, and so they're really good with their words. And so I am excited about this aspect about it being written by a journalist, so he can ask the right questions. He knows how to open people up, essentially. So it says he
takes on a journey across 101 countries, highlighting a unique value that has defined each nation's history and culture. Now we can apply these to find purpose and fulfillment in our own lives. Every day we make decisions based on what we believe in, values that define the ambitions we set, the choices we make, and the relationships we choose. In The Values Compass, Dr. Mandeep Ray shows how the countries of the world epitomize the power of values, provide an ideal guide to help us understand our own, and teach us important lessons about success. From Moroccan compromise to Armenian survival and American entrepreneurship, The Values Compass shows how we can incorporate the values that animate nations into our own lives, seeing ourselves through the eye of the world and shedding new light on the opportunities and challenges that define us. The result is an insightful and readable collection that helps us reflect on the values that matter most, last longest, and have the greatest power to create change.
And so that wraps up my physical TBR list for my nonfiction books. I love reading environments. I love reading about politics, specifically like how we as a society have come to govern ourselves the way we do. I love reading about cultures, ancient and modern, and travel. And so those are the types of topics that I really look for in nonfiction books. So if those are topics that you like, make sure to stick along. If there's other topics that you'd like me to read or think that I would be interested in, let me know in the comments below. I love finding new and interesting things like geomythology. So if you have a topic like that, just let me know. And if you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them, what I should look out for, what were your pros and your cons. If you're interested in my poetry collection, keep an eye out for the video on my poetry TBR. Until next time, goodbye.